What if investigators have spent 3 months working from a lie? Not a lie about who did it, a lie about where it happened. What if the blood on Nancy Guthrie's front porch was put there on purpose? What if the flower pots propping open those back doors were placed there after the fact? What if the entire picture that law enforcement has been building since February, the staged abduction, the forced entry, the trail of evidence from the bedroom to the front door, was constructed by someone who needed it to look exactly that way? Because that is what a forensic psychologist just said on national television in front of the country. And if he's right, it explains something that 3 months of investigation has not been able to answer. Why, after 90 days of DNA analysis, doorbell footage, and 30,000 tips, this case has produced nothing. Not an arrest, not a named suspect, not even a clear direction. The investigators may have been working a crime scene that was built to fool them. Dr. Gary Brucato sat down with Brian Anton for a CW special that aired this week, and he said something that should have made the entire conversation stop. He said he is personally aware of cases where blood has been deliberately placed at a scene. He said it is entirely within the realm of possibility that Nancy was harmed somewhere else, and that someone returned to her Catalina Foothills home afterward and constructed the appearance of an abduction. The open doors, the flower pots, the blood drops that look like they came from coughing, all of it potentially arranged, all of it potentially false. But there's something else that surfaced this week that no one has connected to Brucato's theory yet. Anton confirmed to Parade that multiple sources say the Guthrie family has asked Nancy's closest friends to stop speaking publicly. The women who shared her daily routine, the people who sat with her over coffee, who heard her concerns, who knew what she was thinking in the weeks before she vanished, asked to stay quiet. 3 months into this investigation, and not a single close friend has appeared on camera to speak about Nancy. Think about that for a moment. In every missing person case you have followed, the friends are among the first voices you hear. They're on local news within 48 hours. They're at vigils. They're telling reporters who this person was. That has not happened here. And the reason it hasn't happened is because the family made a request. A specific, deliberate request. A crime scene that may have been fabricated, and a family that has controlled who gets to speak about the victim. That is what this video is about. The CW special brought together 3 of the most accomplished criminal minds working today. Dr. Burgess, the FBI behavioral scientist whose career helped build the foundation for modern criminal profiling, the work that inspired the series Mindhunter. Dr. Gary Brucato, forensic and clinical psychologist who has spent decades studying the mechanics of violent crime. And Dr. Casey Jordan, criminologist and behavioral analyst. Anton put the full case in front of them. The doorbell footage, the timeline, the ransom notes, the blood, the flower pots, the medication left on the counter, everything the public currently knows. Then he asked them a single question. Who did this? Their answers didn't align on everything, but where they agreed is where this case begins to crack open. All 3 concluded that whoever came for Nancy knew her in some capacity, not a stranger. Not someone who drove through the Catalina Foothills and selected a house at random. Someone with specific knowledge of her life and her property. But Burgess added a distinction that matters. She said Nancy probably didn't know the person who came to her door. The person carrying out the operation knew the target. The target didn't know the person carrying it out. That profile describes someone who existed in Nancy's world without being inside her personal circle. A contractor, a service worker, someone who attended a gathering at her home years ago and remembered the layout, close enough to know the property. Unknown enough that Nancy wouldn't recognize them behind a mask at 2 in the morning. Jordan offered a different reading entirely. She raised the possibility that this began as a burglary, that the abduction only happened after something went badly wrong inside the house. Her reasoning was straightforward. You cannot confirm what was or wasn't taken from a home just because the family didn't immediately report anything missing. Items could have been removed that no one has connected to the crime. Or the entire plan could have shifted the moment Nancy was injured, turning a theft into something far more serious. Burgess pushed back. She said she does not believe theft was the motive. She believes something else brought that person into Nancy's home, and that before long the situation collapsed. Something went wrong. And then she added something that reframes the investigation at its foundation. She said the person captured on the doorbell camera may have been killed afterward, eliminated by someone she described as the boss. Anton pressed her directly. The person we see on that porch, could they be dead, killed by whoever was running this? Burgess said yes, by the boss. She said this was well planned, that whoever is responsible has successfully evaded capture, and that as far as the behavioral science literature is concerned, this type of case has no precedent. None. The woman who helped build the FBI's profiling methodology said on national television that this crime has never been seen before in that field, and that the person who carried it out may have been removed by whoever sent them. Then Brucato went further. He introduced a concept from his own work in forensic literature, what he calls elimination murder, a killing where the victim is removed not out of passion or rage, but because they represent an obstacle. Something pragmatic stands in the perpetrator's way: money, a relationship, freedom from the responsibility of caring for someone, silence about something the victim knows. The defining feature of elimination murder, Brucato said, is that the perpetrator stages the scene to create the appearance of an outside crime. They need the investigation to look outward, toward strangers, toward random actors, because they themselves are the most obvious suspect the moment the crime appears personal. He walked through the indicators present in this case. No sign of a sexual motive, no evidence of a disorganized or erratic attack. The home was described as immaculate, nothing turned over, nothing ransacked, no sign of someone frantically searching for valuables. The victim was not left at the scene, which is the pattern in stranger crimes. Instead, she was removed. And the staging, the propped doors, the flower pots. The blood at the entrance creates the impression of an abduction carried out by someone from outside. Brucato then named the specific motivations that drive elimination murders. Money, the victim stands between the perpetrator and a financial outcome. Knowledge, the victim witnessed or is aware of something that could destroy the perpetrator. Burden, the victim requires care that the perpetrator wants to escape, or a grudge, resentment that has been accumulating quietly for years, sometimes without the victim ever being aware of it. He was clear that elimination murders are cold in their execution even when emotion drives the decision. The resentment, the greed, the frustration may be the spark, but the act itself is calculated, controlled, and always includes a deliberate effort to make it appear that an outsider committed the crime. Because in an elimination murder, the perpetrator is almost always someone close to the victim, someone who would be the first person investigated if the crime looked personal. The staging exists to push the investigation away from them. Burgess added a layer that connects directly to motive. She said the first question you ask in any case is, who is suffering most from this crime? And she said it doesn't have to be the victim.
We received your message, and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay.
She named Savannah specifically. She said one possible motive is making Savannah suffer, taking the person most precious to her and forcing her to live with the uncertainty, the grief, the unresolvable guilt of wondering whether her own public profile made her mother a target. Jordan pushed back on that angle. She said if the motive were revenge against Savannah, the perpetrator would typically need Savannah to know it. Revenge-driven criminals want recognition. They want their target to understand why this is happening to them. And no one has claimed credit. No one has told Savannah this is because of you. Which means either the satisfaction comes from watching her suffer publicly without needing acknowledgement, or the Savannah connection is a distraction, and the actual motive is simpler than anyone has wanted to say directly. Money. The sheriff said this week that he believes investigators now understand the motive. He declined to share it, but if the motive traces back to a loan that was refused, to a property valued at $1 million, to an estate that only becomes accessible when its owner is no longer present, then the elimination murder framework fits with precision. The victim was an obstacle to financial access. The staging was designed to redirect attention toward a stranger. The body was removed to prevent the evidence from pointing inward. And then Brucato said something no one was prepared for. He said it is entirely possible that Nancy's home is not actually the crime scene. That Nancy may have been harmed somewhere else entirely, and that someone returned to the house afterward and built the evidence of a break-in from scratch. The blood that appeared to have come from coughing could have been produced with a syringe. The flower pots could have been placed deliberately to suggest an entry route that was never actually used. The back doors could have been opened from the inside to create the impression of a breach that occurred from outside. He acknowledged this is the less straightforward interpretation, but he was direct about one thing: crime scene staging is common, it happens frequently. And the more sophisticated the perpetrator, the more convincing the staging becomes. Now connect that to the silence. If the crime scene is authentic, if Nancy was carried from her bedroom through that house and out the front door, then the evidence is real. The blood tells investigators something. The flower pot placement tells them something. The DNA on interior surfaces tells them something. Eventually, the forensics lead somewhere. But if the scene was constructed after the fact, if what investigators have been examining for 3 months was placed there to tell a specific story, then they have spent 90 days analyzing fiction. The blood pattern doesn't represent what happened to Nancy. It represents what someone needed investigators to believe happened to Nancy. The flower pots don't show the entry route. They show the story someone wanted told about the entry. And the DNA, the mixed profiles, the hair, the biological material on surfaces throughout the home may include material that was deposited during the staging process rather than during the crime itself. That would explain why 30,000 tips produced nothing, why a CODIS search returned no match, why 3 months of forensic work have not identified a suspect. The investigators may be assembling a puzzle built from pieces designed to form a picture that doesn't exist. And in that context, the silence surrounding Nancy's friends carries a specific and uncomfortable weight. Because if someone staged this, if someone fabricated the scene at Nancy's home to redirect the investigation, the last thing they would want is a close friend of Nancy's sitting down on camera and saying something that contradicts the narrative that was built. Something like, "Nancy told me she was worried about a specific person in her life." Or, "Nancy mentioned she had been arguing with someone about money." Or, "Nancy said she felt pressured, uncomfortable, afraid." Any of those statements from someone who spent real time with Nancy could cut straight through the staging and point investigators toward exactly what the staging was designed to conceal. The family's stated reason for asking friends to stay quiet is to protect the integrity of the investigation. That explanation is not unreasonable. Law enforcement sometimes requests that witnesses limit their public statements to avoid compromising active leads. But Anton confirmed the request came from the family, not from law enforcement. The family made the decision. And the effect of that decision, whether the intent was protection or something else, is that no one who was close to Nancy in the weeks and months before January 31st has shared publicly what she was thinking, what she was worried about, what she was saying about her own life. What was Nancy's state of mind in the days before she disappeared? Was she concerned about anything? About anyone? Did she mention the loan? Did she talk about feeling unsafe? Her friends would know. And they are not talking. Both Burgess and Brucato described a figure operating behind the person on the porch, and their descriptions align in ways that point to a very specific type of individual. Brucato described someone with antisocial and psychopathic personality traits, someone whose pattern of scheming, manipulation, and cruelty didn't begin with this crime. It built across a lifetime of interactions where other people were treated as instruments. He said if this person is local, there is a trail. People in their orbit would remember arguments that escalated over nothing, ego-driven conflicts, a pattern of resentful, hot-headed behavior that those around them would recognize clearly. Burgess described someone who enjoys watching the chaos from a distance, someone who may be consuming the media coverage of this case with genuine satisfaction, someone who sent the operative to that front door knowing he would be recorded, possibly setting him up to take the fall if things unraveled, and who then eliminated the operative afterward because a living witness is a permanent liability. Jordan introduced the concept of a narcissistic architect, someone who derives pleasure from controlling the narrative. The ransom note sent to TMZ, the media frenzy, the public speculation, all of it potentially feeding the ego of someone who sees themselves as the one pulling the strings while the world scrambles to catch up. But Jordan also introduced a counter theory that the room didn't see coming. She said she has become increasingly open to the possibility that this is beginner's luck. That the reason no one has been caught isn't because the operation was brilliantly executed. It's because it was executed so poorly that investigators have been searching for the wrong type of criminal. They're looking for someone organized, methodical, and experienced. What they may actually be dealing with is someone who stumbled through the entire thing and got away with it purely because their incompetence doesn't match any pattern investigators are trained to recognize. She pointed to what's visible in the doorbell footage, the plant held in front of the camera. That isn't a sophisticated counter-surveillance technique. That is someone who genuinely believes a leaf will block a lens. The holster worn visibly on the outside of the jacket. That isn't tactical. That is someone who has never carried a weapon in an operational context. The overall presentation isn't professional. It's amateur in every visible detail. And Jordan argued that amateur crimes are sometimes harder to solve than professional ones precisely because the behavioral patterns profilers rely on simply aren't present. But she added a qualifier that carries weight. Even if the person on that porch is an amateur operating in a panic, even if this began as a burglary and spiraled into something far larger, the behavior of everyone surrounding this case in the aftermath raises entirely separate questions. The 14-hour silence before anyone checked on Nancy, the family's request for friends to stay quiet, the boxes leaving the property. Those are not the responses of people blindsided by a random crime. Those are the responses of people managing a situation. Brucato pushed back on the lone actor theory on statistical grounds, removing an elderly woman with limited mobility from a home, through a security gate into a vehicle and away from a residential neighborhood in the middle of the night, without detection is an extraordinarily complex operation for a single person. He said it is not impossible. He has interviewed people who accomplished remarkable things under adrenaline, but probable, no. He believes there is a group involved. And more people means more weak points. Chains break at their weakest link unless that link has already been eliminated. Burgess placed the operative at approximately late 20s, local to Tucson, either gone from the area after the footage was released publicly or no longer alive. She described the moment that footage went public as a turning point. The operative would have seen his own image on every screen in the country. Whatever confidence he had carried into that night would have vanished immediately. She has spoken with convicted criminals who described that exact moment, watching themselves appear on the news, as the most destabilizing experience of their lives. The certainty they had felt about getting away with it, gone in an instant. Jordan agreed. She said that on the day the footage was released, this person would have made a visible and drastic change. Quit a job, left town, ended a relationship, gone completely dark on social media. Something that the people around him would have noticed. Someone in his circle recognized the body, the walk, the posture, and then watched that person's behavior collapse the moment the images went public. Brucato was blunt about where investigators should be pressing. He said he would stake his own life on the fact that the operative has a history of engaging with sex workers and drug dealers in the Tucson area, that those are the communities where he would be recognized, not in a neighborhood association, not in a church. In the circles where people operate outside the law and where the footage of a man with a plant in front of a doorbell camera would mean something specific to someone who has seen that face before. He also addressed the reward directly. $1,200,000 sitting unclaimed for 3 months isn't a mystery if you understand the calculation happening in the communities where recognition is most likely. For someone who knows who the operative is, but who also operates in those same circles, the question isn't $1 million versus silence. It's $1 million versus prison time for whatever that person has done that would surface the moment they walked into an interview room with federal investigators. That reframes the silence around the reward. It may not be that nobody knows who was on that porch. It may be that the people who know are the people who cannot afford to say so. All three experts arrived at a conclusion that connects directly to what this channel has been building across every video in this series. The operative did not work alone. Brucato said there is a small group of people involved in this. Burgess said the boss orchestrated it. Jordan called the lone actor scenario improbable. And Brucato said the thing that matters most: if the person on that porch is caught alive, he leads investigators down the spiderweb to its center. And at the center, he said, you will find someone, a wolf in sheep's clothing. The center of the spiderweb, the boss, the puppet master, the person who knew Nancy's life well enough to write the plan, and cold enough to remove the person who carried it out when the risk of leaving them alive became too high. 90 days, no arrest. A crime scene that 3 of the country's most respected forensic experts say may have been fabricated. A family that has restricted the voices of the people who knew the victim best. An operative who may no longer be alive. A boss who may be watching this right now. And an investigation that may have been chasing a version of events that was written specifically for them by the person who committed the crime. The DNA is at the FBI. If it produces a match, if it connects to someone with ties to a family member. To the music scene, to the 4-mile stretch between 2 houses in Tucson, then the staged crime scene theory stops being a theory. It becomes the explanation for why 90 days of work produced nothing. Because the investigators weren't chasing the truth. They were chasing the story someone built for them. And the friends who have been asked to stay quiet may be sitting on the one detail, one sentence Nancy said about money, about family, about feeling unsafe that unravels the entire construction. That may be why they were asked not to speak. To protect the investigation. Or to protect something else entirely. I'm not going to tell you which one. That's not what this channel does. What this channel does is present what three of the most experienced criminal minds in the country said on national television this week. Present what the lead investigative reporter confirmed about the family silencing those closest to the victim, and ask the questions that putting those two things together demands. 90 days, no arrest, a crime scene that may be fake, a family controlling the narrative, an operative who may be dead, a boss who may be watching. And an investigation that may have been running on a ghost story since the very first hour. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me what you think. Was the crime scene real or was it staged? Because three of the most respected profilers in the country just told the nation it might be fake. And the silence surrounding this case is starting to sound less like caution, and more like something else entirely.